Hey everyone, welcome back to Wistful Thinking, and today we're talking about The Bride. The Bride, you have to say it like that because there's an exclamation point in the title. So, this is a movie that got some mixed reviews upon its release, and if anything, controversy kind of like drives me to see a film in theaters. I don't know, I mean, it's great to see a movie that's like just gets high rankings from critics and audiences alone, and that's fantastic. But it's really movies that kind of split an audience that I'm like, I don't know. There's something about that intrigues me because I tend to not like a lot of movies that people do like, and I like some movies that people don't like, you know? So, The Bride. I remember seeing set photos of this and looking at the costume design, and I was like, what is this? And I think that's because Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein was also coming out, a movie I still haven't seen. But then the trailer dropped for this, and there was a really kind of cool Bonnie and Clyde vibe to it, you know, that kind of 1930s aesthetic, but also a bit anachronistic, like a Baz Luhrmann Great Gatsby, you know, thing. And I actually like that. I dig the trailer. I was like, I'm down for this. This looks like fun. If nothing else, you know Christian Bale and Jessie Buckley are going to give a hell of a performance. And that was it. So I sat down in the theater, and the movie starts. And it opens with Jessie Buckley playing Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein. And it's unclear where she is. It looks like it's just a dark hole, or I guess. But from what she's telling us, she's been long gone for a while now, and she has nothing but her own thoughts to sit with, to stir in. And we're told she's going to tell us a story. In so many words, she says the story she wanted to tell but wasn't able to. And then it proceeds to go on and be like, and this is the fucking greatest story you're ever going to hear. What's scarier than love? Prepare for the coming of the motherfucking bride. Something like that. It happens. And I remember sitting in the theater with my friend, and of course it's a pretty packed audience. It's a Friday evening. And you can kind of feel when there's an energy in the crowd and when there's not. And unfortunately for this opening, everyone was just kind of like, you know? I don't think anyone was expecting to be in for an artsy movie. Not that there's anything wrong with that. However, it's got to make a little bit of sense. And I'm afraid this movie doesn't make a whole lot of sense the more you think about it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get into the plot. Mary Shelley tells us that she's going to tell us the story, and she starts with the main character, and she's like, let's call her Ida. You know, so this is a story of her telling. And from what we can glean in the first scene with Ida, she's somewhat of a call girl. She's hanging around with these kind of mafioso types. And then Mary Shelley tries to break into basically out of her consciousness. It's like a split personality. And Ida speaks with an American accent. Mary Shelley does not. And so we can differentiate between the two when we're seeing Ida speak or Mary Shelley. And often when Mary Shelley takes over, she's speaking in kind of just a stream of consciousness. Like something might trigger her and she's saying a bunch of words, like spitting out words like a thesaurus, or maybe some alliteration or a rhyming scheme, something like that. And everyone's kind of freaking out, like, what's going on with Ida? The audience is like, I don't know what's going on either. But as you could probably guess, Ida meets an unhappy demise. Anyway, we jump from that to Frankenstein's monster, who just has taken on the name Frankenstein, because let's be real, how many times have we said Frankenstein and we meant Frankenstein's monster? We get it, you know? It's Frankenstein, but the monster, whatever. Anyway, he encounters a doctor, played by Annette Bening, and he's like, hey, listen, I've been alive a long time, I need a bride. And Annette Bening's like, all right, kind of, in so many words, you know, she's like, let's do it. So she builds him a bride, and Ida comes back to life. Again, it's Ida slash Mary Shelley. And essentially they kind of go on a little bit of an adventure. You know, Frankenstein wants a bride, or Frank as they call him throughout the movie, Frank or Frankie. But Ida is like, I don't know who you are, dude. In fact, neither does Frank, for that matter. He calls her Penelope, his pretty penny. And, you know, they experience things. They experience life together. They grow to trust one another. And as it turns out, some tragedy befalls them. A couple of murders. And they have to go on the run. So it's Bonnie and Clyde pretty much for the rest of the movie. There's some investigators played by Peter Sarsgaard and Penelope Cruz that are after him. And that's kind of the setup for the bride. And I think there is a lot of interesting things going on in this movie. From the get-go, this movie is very confusing. Going back to the beginning, we're told that Mary Shelley is going to tell us a story. So it's a story of her own making. She's telling it to us. In fact, if you're familiar with the original Bride of Frankenstein, that's how that movie started. In a sense, it was Mary Shelley and her husband, and the fucking Baron is just hanging out with them because they're all swingers from what I can gather. And, you know, the Baron's like, oh, Mary Shelley, what a grotesque, crazy, frightening story you told. And he rolls these R's a lot. He's like, please. It doesn't have an R in it. I sound like Roger Rabbit. Hide me, Eddie, please. How could you? And she's like, it was actually quite easy. I'll tell you another story because it doesn't end there. And so thank you. So the Bride of Frankenstein is her telling, she's basically amusing a couple of people. And so I could see how that could translate really well to a remake, because this is kind of a remake of sorts. But the fact that Mary Shelley doesn't have an audience, I mean, we're the audience. I guess we're just in the ether with her there, and it's some sort of purgatory, or I don't know, just the endless black of death, you know, something like that. But it starts things off on a weird foot. And we're like, okay, fine. And then there's the matter of Mary Shelley's trying to break through the consciousness of Ida, a character that she's manifesting in the story. And it begs the question, why? If Mary Shelley wants to imbue this character with her own voice, why doesn't she just do it? Excuse me. You know, I guess she wrote Frankenstein on a dare, and what's told to us at the beginning is that she didn't say everything she really wanted to say. But now there's nobody to tell her what to say or what not to say. It's just us. It's just her. I mean, as far as we know, she's just talking to herself. It seems that way. So why this manifestation? All right. Take two. So why this manifestation? Come on now. So why this manifestation of a kind of split personality, or her trying to break through this fictional character? It's a very intriguing concept. I love it. Jessie Buckley does an amazing job bouncing back and forth between the two characters. And maybe there's something to be said about the expectations of an artist and what their true voice wants to say. You know, art has to speak to it for itself. And the moment you start telling people exactly what they should be thinking or feeling is the moment you failed as an artist. You have to present your work and let people, you know, come to their own conclusions with it. At least I feel that way. So I guess it just doesn't make a lot of sense here. If this was a descendant of Mary Shelley and it took place in modern times, and she was telling her own version of The Bride of Frankenstein, that would kind of make a little more sense, because she lives in modern times. She would want to imbue the story and the character with experiences a modern person has gone through. Things that this film does bring up, like very much in the forefront, Me Too. There's literally a scene where Ida screams, "Me too, me too." We get it. It's not exactly a subtle movie. But I'm not really sure it quite works when you're just hitting the audience over the head with your thoughts or ideas in that sense. Or alternatively, somehow, again, I wouldn't know how this would work for this story, but somehow Mary Shelley does inhabit the body of a real person and has things to say and wants to get them out, you know. But when it's her when the story is her creation, it doesn't seem to quite work as well. It's a narrative device that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially when you take this extra step. And I might be getting this wrong, but when Frankenstein meets Annette Bening, I do not remember the doctor's name in this. I apologize. I'll look it up. The least I could do is look it up. I have a computer. We have the technology. All right. Dr. Euphronius? Okay, I didn't know that was her name. All right, Euphronius. So she is aware of Frankenstein, the story, the monster. And Christian Bale, as Frank, introduces himself as such. So in this story that Mary Shelley is telling, is the book Frankenstein a real thing, but also what actually happened in the book? It's a weird meta device, and again, maybe I read that scene wrong, or possibly Frankenstein's monster is so popular that every doctor knows about it or heard about it. But if it's true, then why would she be initially reluctant to see him? Wouldn't she be like, oh my God, you're still alive? Of course you are. You're some weird creation, you know? And so from then, it would have been nice to see a little bit more of Annette Bening as that doctor. I think Annette could have really killed it in that role. I mean, she does do a wonderful job, but I wanted to really buy into the kind of a touch of madness that would drive a doctor to try to reanimate a dead corpse. You know, we've seen it with Dr. Frankenstein. We've seen it with Herbert West in Reanimator. And I think that's the fun of playing such a role. And I think just giving a little bit of time for us to breathe in that moment would have been nice before resurrecting Ida as the bride. And speaking of, earlier in the review, I said that I saw production stills of like the costume design and everything, and I was like, what is that? You know, but it works really well for the movie. In fact, one of the things I really love about the movie is the design of Frankenstein and his bride, as well as the actors who portray them. Christian Bale is wonderful as the monster. He's really great. In fact, I'd argue that his arc works better than the main characters. I mean, he is one of the main characters, but the movie is called The Bride. And unlike the original Bride of Frankenstein, she is pretty much in the whole thing, not just like the first bit and the last bit. And when Christian Bale tells us that he's not looking for someone just to sleep with, he is looking for someone to spend the rest of his undead life with. Like, we buy it. We just immediately buy into that. And he has kind of a bit of that ferocity that you expect from a monster, but also the tender moments are handled really well too. And I think when I don't know if fall in love is the right word for this movie, but when they kind of form a bond, the bride and the monster, you buy it. You believe it. You believe why Ida would be, reluctant to join him, and then you believe her when she does join him on this adventure. And that brings us to Jessie Buckley, who's fucking amazing. My earliest recollection of her work that I saw, anyway, was I'm Thinking of Ending Things. What a hell of a movie. I'm not going to even get into it. I can't. I don't even know if I can recommend it. It's one of those movies like Requiem for a Dream where you're like, that was great. I never want to watch it again. Except I'm a masochist, so I do want to watch that movie again. I'm Seeking a Friend. Sorry, I'm Thinking of Ending Things. I'm Seeking a Friend for the End of the World is a very different movie. Also kind of bittersweet, but not quite in the realm we're talking about here. But she really stuck out to me. And then I remember seeing her again in Fargo, the TV series, and she was excellent in that. And of course, last year, Hamnet came out, and she fucking killed it. She's going to get the Oscar for that role. She's amazing. She's an amazing actress. So I knew, if nothing else from this movie, that you could do no wrong with Jessie Buckley. She's great. The dialogue, not all the time, but I think she kills it. She's always fascinating to watch on screen. She is the queen of creating these scenarios where she plays a character and does not conform to societal norms. Like, she won't be quiet in the middle of this crowd or that. I'm talking about like the end of Hamnet and the Globe Theater. There's a scene like that too in like a club where she's just going crazy. She's walking on tables and stuff like that. And you feel like that secondhand embarrassment. I mean, in a good way, because in a way that she delivers. Man, she's great. And actually, I really love the look of the bride in this movie. She kind of like coughs up this black liquid when she first comes back to life, and it stains like the side of her face. I thought that was really cool. I don't know, they kind of have a little bit of that waviness. Instead of going like up, it just kind of comes to the side. There was something that worked for me here. It is a bit anachronistic, but in a way that worked for me. I mentioned a similar thing about Wuthering Heights, where the clothing seemed that way, but the movie wasn't trying to be at all. This knows it's anachronistic. It's a stylized version of the 1930s. Ida, or the bride, and the monster go to a club. It's like an underground club, and they kind of try to sell it as like, but it's like not anything you'd hear in the 1930s. It's club music, and strobes are going off and everything like that. But it's fine. We're kind of going with it. And that, in fact, that's one of the few instances where I felt like this movie's weird as fuck, and I'm kind of digging it. You know, I was kind of into it. Like, the further it went along, I was like, this is a weird little artsy mess of a movie, and I kind of like that because it's ballsy. It's super ballsy. It's super ballsy. I don't know. There's something about that appeals to me. That when you know a filmmaker is not following a studio note and is actually doing their own thing, I love that. One of the aspects that I really like about the monster is that he's obsessed with this actor who's played by Jake Gyllenhaal. And he goes to the movie theaters all the time to watch his movies. He knows them by heart. He'll do like the little motions in the theater seat. Everyone's yelling at him. You know, it's great. It's always nice to see good like theater scenes in a movie. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. That's something that's always appealed to me. I like a good theater scene. There's one shot in particular where the bride and the monster are already on the run, and they head up to Chicago. And we're following behind them. We're seeing them in focus, and the rest of Chicago is a little out of focus. It's like a handheld shot. But I love that so much because I'm like, any other movie would have introduced a grand vista of Chicago. Like, here's 1930 Chicago. Here you are. You know, step up, get your ticket for the show, the big show. Man, I really missed my calling, huh? I was born 100 years. Born 100 years? No, that's not right. I'm 100 years too far, I guess, almost. Anyway, I really love that shot. And we don't see a lot of like big city stuff, so that part was kind of nice. And for me, this is when the film kind of peaks, when they hit Chicago, and they actually have a big Young Frankenstein reference that I don't think works that well. I don't know. It's like, all right, you did the thing. There's a weird thing this movie tries to do where it's like moments of humor, and the theater was dead silent in each and every one of them. It's just like, it never quite hits that stride of being like a fun movie. Do you remember like the very first Suicide Squad movie by David Ayer, and how drab and boring and dull and stupid and dumb and boring and dull it was? All of those things. And the trailer painted out to be this like colorful explosion of anti-hero nonsense and just fun, like a fun, good time. That's almost what this movie feels like. This movie is way better comparatively to the first Suicide Squad movie, but it never quite reaches those levels of fun that I kind of wanted out of this movie. I think it could have tapped into that fun a little bit. And I can't really fault Maggie Gyllenhaal, who directed the film, for trying to do something a little more artistic with it. But it just never quite reached those moments of fun that I felt would have made the dramatic moments more poignant. There's some dramatic beats that kind of come out of left field in this movie, and I was just like, all right. And they come and they go, like, very fast. And I'm like, I guess that's not a thing anymore. And, you know, when you have Christian Bale and Jessie Buckley, Like, you can capitalize on those little romantic moments. And I never felt it really did. Like, it gets so close sometimes. And eventually, the second half of the movie, I just felt a little bored by it. It kind of dragged and dragged. Like, I mentioned Chicago, it almost felt like the movie was going to end after that. And I knew that wasn't quite the case, because it would have been a really short movie, but I honestly would have really liked that. I miss short movies. And I don't know if it had much story left to say, aside from like, oh, okay, the bride has to experience a few more atrocities, and they got to run a little bit longer, and the investigators got to investigate a little bit longer. And then the climax they build up to just doesn't feel like it has the weight that it could have. We see the romance between the monster and the bride, and we sense, there's got to be something big or tragic to happen in the end. It doesn't quite get there. And by that point, I was just kind of watching scenes unfold, and they feel a little disconnected, and sometimes they don't even make sense. There's a scene at a drive-thru where the monster is watching another Jake Gyllenhaal movie. And sometimes when he's watching the film, he pictures himself up there. Not even as the main character, but like as a side character. And then this instance, he sees himself and the bride as the main characters. But so do other characters in the movie, seemingly. And I'm like, all right, why? I think it's all right if you want to open up this world to show people what the monster is imagining or picturing, but it's the only time it's done. Furthermore, Mary Shelley is telling the story, and shouldn't it be about her? And I'm not sure exactly what she's trying to say with the monster, but the monster has the most well-rounded arc. Unfortunately, he's like the more fascinating of the two characters. It's a little bit of Taxi Driver in there. And again, I have to applaud Christian and Jessie for really carrying this movie hardcore on their backs. By the time the end, the climax comes, we're just kind of like, all right. And the Monster Mash plays over the end credits, and we're like, that was a movie. It's frustrating. It's frustrating because like I wanted to like this movie. I liked the two leads, and I liked their designs, but the story was really kind of painful and boring and amateurish at times. Insubordinate and churlish. And I just wish it was a smarter script, because I think there's really something fascinating buried in there. I love the idea of Mary Shelley telling that story, The Bride of Frankenstein. In fact, I'm not even sure that her being dead and like sitting in a dark black hole somewhere is the right foot to set this story on, because it's so depressing and dark. I think you have to work your audience into that moment. Look at Moulin Rouge. Like the story is told from Christian's point of view, who's Ewan McGregor. He's gone through this heartbreak, but he's a romantic. So we see the story that happened through his eyes. It's all bright and colorful, and it's like erratic, because that's where his kind of mind is at. Granted, that's Baz Luhrmann's directing style, but it works in that narrative sense. That's stuff I apply to the movie. It's because this character. And if Mary Shelley is in a depression or crazed, I think the story should reflect that. Or we work our way there. Why even do that? Have Mary Shelley, again, hearkening back to the original, at some sort of party. And she's witnessing men and their arrogance and their dismissiveness towards women and their accomplishments. Because it happened then, it happens now. And what if she crafted that story at a party as a way to work into the psyche of men and to bring them down and be like, listen to us, kind of think, God, I would have loved that story. And that wasn't this. Not quite. Not in the way I wanted. Like it's amazing. The movie kind of like, it's like a shaky start, and then it kind of builds up, and we're getting to something, and then it kind of plummets for me. And so it's kind of frustrating. And reading, I'm not surprised there's a mixed response online about this, but reading like some of the audience reactions. I'm like, wow, people fucking hated this movie, you know, which I feel bad because I think there's a lot to chew on. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. It just doesn't quite nail it. But Maggie tried, and everyone else did, and I applaud that. Now, I've talked about scores in the past, but I don't score the same way everyone does. I do a 1 to 10 scale, and if it's a 5 right in the middle, that means I didn't hate it, I didn't love it. It's just bam, right in the middle. Sometimes I'll tell people, oh, that was like a 5 for me, and they're like, you fucking hated it. You wish death upon the filmmakers. I'm like, no. It just was flat in the middle. And that's where this movie falls for me. Like, there is some stuff that I really appreciated, I thought was really daring. And then there's some stuff that I'm like, this is really bad. And it kind of just evens out for me. So I give this movie a 5 out of 10. It has a lot of great, interesting things going for it. It has 2 amazing leads. And I really love the portrayals and design. I think the bride's design is fucking gnarly and cool. I like it a lot, actually. But I can't recommend it. It's just frustrating, and it misses the mark on a lot of points I think it's trying to make. And the narrative framing doesn't make sense. Yeah. So that's The Bride. The Bride. Frustrating. But, you know, they can't all be winners. And, yeah. Anyway, thank you again for sitting down with me and letting me rant about a movie for a little bit. You know, if you see it, please let me know what you thought. Until next time, take care.